prescribing, though. You should get a bottle of wine.
Why not?
Got it.
Yes. That looks like the good stuff.
That's a Tokaji Azu from 2013 with Putons in it. I don't know what that other word means.
Welcome to the Backpack
Hello.
Show, where we don't talk about wine, we talk about success. And so for that reason, today's guest is a perfect fit. Dr. Eric Frazer wrote a book, The Psychology of Top Talent, and he spent decades studying what makes some people successful, what character traits, while others continue to struggle.
There's so much going to happen in the show, but only if I find this button.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show. You know, normally a forensic psychologist isn't the kind that goes on to write a book about talent. Usually they write books about where XYZ body got put or something like that. So I understand.
Chloe, we were just talking about you. I was saying, we know a great Squarespace developer if you ever need one.
If you want Squarespace, it doesn't look like Squarespace, go to Chloe Forbes Kidlin. Yes. And Robert Collins just got a new job. Congratulations, Mr. Collins. You know, I don't want to call you nomadic or something of a job slut, but I don't actually remember the name of the new place because you've had a lot of other jobs.
Stop it. That's not nice.
It's utterly true. Hey, you know what else is true? Want an audio podcast?
Castos.com. You did it. Oh, I was waiting.
I know. I was thinking about not doing it, but at least I was thinking. So Castos.com. You can get your own podcast hosting right there. CPs and a podcast. It's Castos.com. My friend Matt Medeiros works there. Hey, do you want a .online domain? Because who wouldn't? Eric Frazer's in the website looking business all of a sudden. You can get a .online domain. Go to cbrogan.me/online. Put in the code Chris any way you want.
All caps. It has to be in all caps, so you won't get the discount. I don't know why.
Caps, I guess. So you get a .online domain from the really nice people who give us the Backpack Show site. Hey, would you like to make a cool video show just like this? You can. You can use the software StreamYard. StreamYard's pretty cool. They've added some really cool stuff now. Multi-camera support, picture-in-picture support, all kinds of cool background sharing stuff. This is an inexpensive app, and I am we're the whatever the most expensive version you could buy. We're that user.
We could play smooth jams during this whole thing.
Yeah, we could. We could have background music if you want.
Please don't.
Yeah, like a bossa nova.
No, we need Dr. Frazer out here.
See Brogan and me saw StreamYard. Hey, you into NFTs?
Hey.
We're not. But if you want a cool crypto-driven search engine, you can get one, presearch.com. They stuck it to the man. They saw what Google was doing and messing around and kind of making decisions based on who was paying them more money. And they said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm launching my own search engine that 11 people are going to use. Presearch.com.
Hey, that's not nice. Lots of people use it. It's a really good search engine.
It's my go-to domain search now. And it's also a decentralized search engine, and you can use the crypto coin if you remember to log in. You can use the crypto coins that they provide you in there just for using it to stake things. So you could type shrink and it would go right to Dr. Frazer's website.
You are sassy today.
I'm feeling sassy.
You're sassy.
Dr. Frazer. Bonjour tout le monde. Comment ça va? Ça va bien et tout. Quand je ski vite. Dr. Eric Frazer, hello, welcome.
Buongiorno. I see we're doing foreign languages today.
Yes. Well, Carol is in Canada.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
And Chloe's in Scotland.
Estén contigo. And Chloe's from Scotland, which has their own made-up language.
Which we do not ever try to pronounce.
No, we don't pronounce Scottish things. Just like in the movie Trainspotting, a couple different scenes, they were technically speaking English, and they had to subtitle it because no one could understand what the guy was saying.
I mean, some people do that with movies from Boston.
Rumor has it you wrote a book called The Psychology of Top Talent. Like I said in the little intro of Shenanigans, it's not all that often that a forensic person goes off and starts talking about talent. Was that just because, sick and tired of the day-to-day grind? Was it because, this is an important topic? What put you in front of that book? What made you put the title, this project together?
Yeah, so it's such a interesting story for me because you're spot on. It's like, so what's the intersection here between forensics and positive psychology? And the quick version is that, forensic psychology, it's not about, digging up dead bodies. Those are the forensic pathologists. But forensic psychology is really about solving puzzles. And in service of that, you really quickly and precisely, as one goes through their professional career, learn how to pinpoint precisely issues, issue spot problems, identify things really quickly and precisely. So in any case, that was a skill that served me well. Meanwhile, like to actually do a good job at that, you have to live sort of and eat your own dog food, as some people might say, right? And have a real positive psychology mindset and all the psychological competencies that go into professional and personal development. So these were things that I constantly read in the background, although I never like deliberately applied it in my professional life until one day this guy at Cisco reached out to me and said, hey, can you talk to me a little bit about, leadership development? And I happened to be reading a book about grit. And at that point in time, then I went in for a presentation and people liked it and clapped. So I didn't get booed out of there. And, the rest is kind of history. And I just started writing about and talking about the things that I was reading and sort of doing in my own life.
Steve Garfield says, forensics. He's dead, Jim. Thanks, Steve. So when you're thinking about success, then, I mean, something had to kind of trigger you to start sifting through the qualities people have when you look at successful people versus people who struggle professionally and personally. So what was kind of the first thing you noticed that distinguished between the people that were successful and the people who couldn't seem to get things going?
Yeah, so there's, it's not just one thing, and I'm one of these research geeks. I really like getting into the databases and saying, okay, what's been written about success? What's been written about leadership? What's been written about emotional intelligence? And, beyond the fluff part where it's, it's a bestseller or whatever, but really looking at like these hardcore academics that are looking at this stuff and putting people through clinical trials and this, that, and the other thing. And look and identifying these core traits. And then you can match that up with the business articles and say, okay, what's McKinsey and HBR writing about and Wired Magazine and things like that, and say, okay, do these two things come together? And they really do. There's kind of like a nice list of psychological competencies, but one of the important ones is having Carol Dweck's coined word, growth mindset, right? Like always wanting to be curious, right? Curious about learning new skills and competencies. You guys were horsing around earlier talking about wine and what does wine have to do with success. So one of my little anecdotal stories is about 7 years ago, I got into making wine, and so far, it hasn't turned into alcoholism, but the good news is, I learned a lot of like really nitpicky, like get out the periodic table things about pressing grapes and crushing grapes and blending grapes and learning a really unique skill. So I guess it gets to this growth mindset, like you're just exercising the brain in new directions, right?
I'll never say wine has nothing to do with my success. So then curiosity, right? You mentioned curiosity,
right?
And grit. I heard grit in the mix. Let's see what other... I'm trying to figure out. I want a punch list of one of the things I have to be.
Yeah, it's in the book.
I know it's in the book, but we're talking to him now, so
I know. Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of people kind of starts like this. When I'm meeting with people for the first time, and they're stuck. Okay, that's the word everybody's been using like the last 2 years. They're feeling stuck, and one of the first things that I like to get into is like, what matters to you, right? Like, what is on your mind? What's keeping you up at night? What are you dreaming about, right? And then after that, we kind of get into, well, what are you doing and what's not working? Like, how do we get you unstuck? And there's kind of like a portfolio of actions and things that I like to take a look at, which are like, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Like that gets to the grit piece, right? Like, what are you specifically doing, inch by inch, day by day, hour by hour to execute a long-term goal? So that's kind of like how we go from micro to macro pretty quickly.
You're muted. Chris likes to mute.
So on my Mac, in the bottom left corner is the unmute button, and if I go just a little too far, it's the lock the whole screen button. It's
that's my favorite. The sleep corners.
I have hot corners set up, and it's the sleep corner right next to the unmute. So about 80 times in Zoom, I go and then smile at a screen. All right. So grit. One of the other things I was paying attention to in the book is there's a sort of people who go above and beyond, and there also is about people who understand and develop leadership talent. One thing I've noticed in the company that I'm doing a lot of work with right now is it is about leadership all the way down, like turtles all the way down. It is some of the problems that we have with some of the team members that we've had have been that they're not exactly leadership minded. It feels like they're individual contributors with a leadership title. And so I'm running into that a little bit. They need to have that sort of leadership mindset of, I'm going to develop these people. In fact, I would like to make them as smart to be my replacement, which shouldn't be threatening. It should mean that I've got another place to go. Is that some of what you're seeing in the Top Talent book? And how do you kind of instill that if someone's maybe struggling with that feeling of, I don't want to be replaced?
Yeah, leadership is a tricky thing because, there's these cultures and organizations, and, someone that I was recently, someone who I'm still working with right now, there's this whole sort of hierarchy, and there's a lot of people that are super smart, and then there's a lot of people, like you were saying, with really important titles who are smart enough, but really not leaders, really not sort of leveraging their full talent, or it's lost its importance for them. So there's a lot of friction in the organization because there's people that are motivated and care and want to do better and want to treat their people well. And then there's sort of the other side of the table where it's status quo, business as usual, problem, somebody else solve it. And that's a real difficulty in organizations. So the people, meaning the leaders and the organizations that I am seeing doing really well with this, have what I call a people first mentality, a people first mindset, right? Like they actually care about and value their people. They tend to be organizations that have core values that are actually paid attention to and effectuated in the organization in the day-to-day business operations of things. Versus the alternative. So this as an interesting example. So a colleague of mine working for this huge finance company, huge investment company, hundreds of millions of dollars. And he was, telling me about the layout of the organization. I said, well, what's the cafeteria look like? And I think it had a Mr. Coffee, maker from like 1975. So, it's things like that. And that's why, during the pandemic, people learned that they really liked working from home. It's because there really was a work-life balance, and people like working from home because they have the things that can actually sort of bring out and manifest their best, on a routine basis. So that's why that worked for a lot of people. So, I know that's a bit of a roundabout way to answer your question, but I wanted to point out kind of like a bunch of different vignettes. But it really gets down to kind of like these brass tacks. One, there's got to be organizational values that capture leadership. That's number one. Like if you don't have those, then you're driving blind. And then step two is you have to have a common vocabulary of what the leadership skills, what the psychological competencies are that you actually want to develop. Because if you don't know what they are and you don't have a name for them, you can't teach them, as you were talking to, right? You can't get everybody together and have a focus group and do some exercises or do some think tanking and actually develop that and get some constructive feedback. So that's really, how that sort of all folds into a strategy that leads to successful leadership, at an organizational level, but then on an individual level as well.
Do you ever inspire anybody to quit when you went into one of these big companies to talk to people about success? Was somebody ever like, okay, bye, I think I see greener pastures for myself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes it's just a validating, process. So I had a client who was telling me that unfortunately and was shamelessly told that she didn't have executive presence, and I was like, this is my client, you got to be kidding me. She's probably the smartest person in the organization. And that's an example of where the exit sign is flashing really really bright, and a lot of people are behaving that way. People are waiting for the right moment to leave. I mean, the amount of misery that I hear from really smart, really effective, really nice, kind people that just can't wait to get out and find their home. And their home is, getting to the mothership where they're not only valued for their tacit knowledge and their skills, but they're valued for what they bring as a person, their emotional intelligence to the organization.
There's a person that I went to school with who was in my first year philosophy class, like my freshman year. And we had one lecture from the professor, and it was about like, your purpose, existential type stuff. And that person stood up, walked out of the class, and then left school, just left completely. And there's not like a week that goes by that I'm not like, I wonder what they're doing, because I bet it's real interesting.
Yeah.
When I was thinking,
so
when I was hearing
really
you talk
helping
about
people
that,
find themselves.
yeah, when I was hearing you talk about that, I was thinking about a series of things. One was, there's always these like kind of iconic moments, I think, when you really learn like a business lesson, for instance. And one of the lessons I had, I was worked for the telephone company. I was managing 33 or so employees. And this girl who was like one of my top talent people, she just had it. She just had a really rough day. She was feeling very emotional. She just jumped up off the desk, and like ran out into the hallway and was just having a fit by herself out in the hallway. And so I went out there, and I'm trying to calm her down and talk her down. And she's like, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to leave. And I'm thinking I'm doing a great thing by like, no, you're great. You're great. And then my boss comes around the corner, Dave, and he goes, yeah, you want to leave? Well, there's no bars on those doors. Get out. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Get the hell out. I didn't want this. And I was like, what? I didn't know that was even like a thing you're supposed to do. I thought you're supposed to keep everybody. He was like, no, I don't want some whiny, complaining, crying person who's breaking down and having bad days. I need a great worker.
Oh, I don't want somebody human.
Yeah, exactly. But his point, just that there was no there's no crying in baseball, was his take on it. And I was like, I didn't even know that could be a take. And so as I filter that into partly what you were saying, something I've come to realize in business is that your client, for instance, was a great person, great player, was for whatever reason not the right fit to them. So they're identifying her as bad, but that's their language for it. I wonder if you get into that at all. Like, I wonder if you get into the fact that it's, if they're saying it only means for them and for their fit and for that scenario. She might not be the person, but she might be the most amazing person in the world 97% of the other places. Does that come into play at all?
There's definitely a lot with this notion of fit, right? And unfortunately, in a fair number of organizations, there's a lot of people at the top who really don't know what they were doing. They kind of landed in that spot. This gets a little bit to that imposter syndrome, which I'm not really a big fan of that, but since it's such a popular term, I'll use it the way that it's used. But, this notion that, somebody doesn't feel competent and really that they're as knowledgeable or skill setted as they're claimed to be. The truth is they're really not. So it's not an imposter syndrome. They really are.
People who
they really are imposters.
That way.
Yeah, you really are faking it. Yeah.
They're like, I got this. The people who don't have the skills.
Yeah, and then when somebody comes in who's actually like really smart, and they're like, wait a minute, this person doesn't know what the heck they're doing. It was like, yeah, you're right. And then, and then that's where the friction is, right? That's the misalignment, because how do you, tell the emperor that they're really not wearing any clothes? That's a tough situation, especially, in the upper echelon of executiveness. And
by that point, a lot of people have kind of vouched for that person to get them to that position. So you're burning a whole lot of other bridges.
Right. So that's where it kind of gets to, this back to this original concept, like, is the CEO, is the C-suite, are these true, genuine, authentic, person-focused, people-focused leaders, right? And there's, many books written about leadership. One of the traits that comes down almost all the time is this concept of humility, right? So, humble leaders are the most successful leaders, the most liked leaders, and humility is basically the ability to say, I'm not doing everything right, or I made a mistake. And sometimes those mistakes are hiring mistakes and continuity and legacy mistakes, right? So the real leader will be able to confront that reality, handle it, and make an effective decision about it.
I just want to say before Kerry reads a bunch of questions that I am the absolutely best humble person that I know. All right, Kerry.
I'm just going to leave that where it is. Chloe says, if an individual wants to become top talent, where should they start? For one thing, Chloe, a confidence boost, because you do have the chops. Sorry, I'm just weighing in from someone with personal knowledge.
Yeah, you guys were talking her up before when we were discussing my website. But in any case, where do you start? I mean, there's no one answer to that. It can start with a conversation with someone that is a trusted friend, partner. If you have a mentor or someone that you admire professionally, you can have a meetup and chat over that. And what I like people to do is like sit down with a journal. I'm a big journaler. I believe in it. I like it. It's in my view, it's like a placeholder for your thoughts and for your inspirations, for problems that you're trying to solve, things of that nature. And the question that one of the questions that you can pose to yourself is, what am I passionate about? When you sit with that, and I mean sitting with that in the sense of kind of like a mindfulness meditation exercise, you can get to the bottom of that, and that will be an anchoring thought. And you can think about it in the sense of the next question is, why does this matter to me? Right? This notion of mattering, I think, is really, really helpful to facilitate your discovery process. And then you have sort of like that big shining star up in the sky, and you can start mapping out all the little things that you want to do to get good at that, right? So if you want to become a master chef, you sign up for some cooking lessons and, take some tutorials and listen to some podcasts and really open up that learning portfolio, right? Like ABL, always be learning. And if you find fun ways to do that, right, and really leverage the multiple platforms that one can learn on these days, and put together like your own curriculum or get some guidance on how you want to put your own curriculum, that will bring you have no way of not reaching your destiny.
Carol wants to know if you've seen any research on the link between introversion or extroversion and performance.
Yeah, that's a great question. Someone was asking me about introversion and extroversion yesterday, ironically. Look, the bottom line is introverts and extroverts are high performers, right? They're just high performers at different things. I would say, capitalize on what you're really good at. But if you want to stretch some muscles, if you're not a natural extrovert, it doesn't mean that you can't become one. Or if you're a big mouth like me, an extrovert, and you need to shut up sometimes and be a better listener, there's exercises that are really useful on both sides of the fence, which are, one, this skill of active listening, right? Which is like somebody's talking and you're not doing this, like you're actually, trying to dial in, be present, like really hear what's behind the words, hear what's behind the conversation. And then on the other hand, the assertiveness piece. So if you feel like, you're dying to say your idea, but you're too shy, you're too intimidated, all the other loudmouths at the table always get to say the first things first, and you kind of get the door shut on you. You can learn how to be more assertive and how to be a little bit more assertively challenging without being obnoxious.
Although as a leader, you could also learn to have people submit some ideas in writing first, or, after, and be a little more sensitive to that. So that's a two-sided coin. A Chip says bad bosses often aren't happy with their own roles because they haven't found their own good fit. So it's hard for them to find a good environment for their team members. And Leslie once worked for a man who's very smart, but had his leadership role through a training program and then criticized the work of employees who had worked their way up for decades. So humility is the order of the day.
Yeah, it really gets down to like basic things. It's not as we always say, rocket science. It is psychological science, but it really is, the basics, in terms of, when you think of an organization, it's kind of like a big family of relationships, right? So if you think about, your sort of your nuclear family, right, and all the complicated things that go on there, there's the same kind of complicated things that go on in an organization. It's just a big family, and it's a matter of tending to it, but putting, I guess the way I would argue for it is putting people ahead of profit, right? Because if you're just focused on profit and revenue and product, but you at the expense of ignoring people, you're not going to get the best out of your people. And you want to tap into that raw potential. And in a knowledge economy where innovation wins, you want people to be able to do that. You want them to have a sense of trust in the organization, in the leadership, and amongst the teams to really pull that out and get everybody's best.
I find in my role and my view of all this, one of the things that I see happening a lot is that people who are in a leadership role have an opportunity. They're almost often at this crossroads where they could make the choice to have someone on their team pick up the stuff, do the work, get the extra skills or whatnot, or they do it themselves and they kind of slip into that individual contributor space. I'm curious how you help teams, or if this is even something that came out of the book. Do you have anything to talk about how to keep teams from slipping back into contributorship instead of leadership?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, and but it's also a common one, and it really gets down to the personalities of the team individually, and then the personality of the team as a group. And what you really want to do is kind of like create a methodology to unite them if they're struggling, and if they're doing well, amplify them if they're doing better. And to do that, there has to be a sense of trust within the team. There has to be what I'm going to call, from this great study that was done called the Beyonders, there's this concept called minority of one thinking, right? Which is a really useful exercise, which basically means that you have permission in this team, amongst this group of people, to come up with very unique, different ideas. Like, those are embraced and welcomed. They're not criticized. And when you promote that mindset amongst your team members, that minority of one thinking is embraced, right? You get the best out of everyone. The other notion is that, in teams, sometimes these natural hierarchies get created, like, this is the person who, does the best at this, and this is the person who takes notes, or this is the person who's the thinker. This is the person who, if you don't like his or her idea, they pout and have a silent tantrum. You got to kind of address these things head on, and again, it goes back to the goals, right? So if we talk about, well, what is the goal of this team? Like, what are we all working towards together? Right? You want to sometimes remind people of that, and talk about being able to embrace differences and communicate that, and talk about people's strengths and weaknesses, and having the permission to do that. It has to come first, of course, because it involves some vulnerability. But if you could, have a conversation amongst a team and say, what are you really good at and getting better at these days that I don't know about, right? And what is something that you're having a harder time with, but it's important for you to develop this particular skill? Questions like that, right? That kind of pulls everybody together, and then it gets to be collaborative, maybe in a way that the team hasn't been able to function in a collaborative way.
So Chloe said, it sounds like pattern recognition is a big part of all this. I mean, seeing the same characteristics among successful people and the same among people who are less successful, pattern recognition.
Right. Yes. Yeah, no, it's absolutely, it's pattern recognition, but I would say that it's behavioral and trait pattern recognition. So, like, the trait would be, as we talked about earlier, like, having a gritty attitude, or having a growth mindset attitude, right? Where you're committed to this notion of long-term goals, and there's going to be a big suffer fest until you get there. And then, there's patterns in terms of day-to-day routines, that are more granular. A lot of people have really, really good intentions, and something that I see a lot of people struggling with, or struggling with maintaining, is keeping their days organized in a way that's harmonious and balanced. What do I mean by that? So, this whole work-life balance thing, there's actually a lot to that, because we know that successful workers are basically happy people. They are well balanced in their personal lives. They're intentionally doing things to improve their sense of wellness and well-being, which we know correlates really good with, optimal brain functioning. So, as an example, these are things that, people are building out their daily schedules and saying, okay, I'm going to exercise and do this on Monday. I'm going to go to the yoga studio on Tuesday. I'm going to go for a walk on Wednesday and take it easy, those sorts of things. And on Tuesday, I've got an hour of reading time, where I've got, podcast time in the car or the train or whatever. This is the new skill that I'm working on. This is a conference that I'm going to 3 months from now that we're finally going back to conferences. This is somebody that I'm going to connect with and have a coaching conversation or a mentoring conversation, because I know he or she is really good at this, right? And I'm going to pick this person's brain about, what they're doing, because I don't know anything about it, but that's going to, trigger my own inspiration and innovation, right? Getting those things onto your grid, onto your weekly grid, are really, really important and helpful.
For me, there's a kind of, well, there's two comments I want to make. The first one is that there's kind of I want to say a math or a percentage or something like that, but there's sort of an above and beyond part of my system, and there's a down and in part of my system. There's sergeants who can keep count of their squad, and they always know not only how they're doing with ammo, but they've got everybody in the squad's ammo. And then there's leaders who know which hill they're going to take, and kind of why it matters to take that hill, or maybe wait up a second because other things are going to happen, right? There's above and beyond. There's like past where I'm supposed to be looking that I need to keep, for vision reasons. And then there's in. That's one comment, which I don't even have a question for. And then the other one is just the idea that everyone thinks that their path, your book's about top talent, not top leadership. Your book is about talent, which reminds us that individual contributors are just as important to the whole system, right? Every system needs individual contributors, and it needs small groups and small teams as much as it needs leaders, because, it's not, we're going through a thing where there's a bunch of people who got promoted just through a duration of time, and they're suddenly at a level that would have been great in a podunk company, but we're a big company now, we're an enterprise, and we're getting bigger. So I guess I want you to talk on which either of those, warmed you up a little bit.
Yeah, so it's you bring up an important point, and a really important distinction, maybe is the better word, which is that, like, being a leader is really about a mindset for your own professional development. It's not a title, or back when there were business cards, like some little slogan underneath your name about what you're really good at. It's really about a commitment to being your best and engaging in habits, routines, practices that develop those habits. That's what's really important. And I have a nice example of a client of mine that I worked with, who is an actress, is a professional DJ, and was kind of like what we would call like a rising star. I see her as one of the rising stars. And maybe she didn't initially see herself as a leader or a rising star. And it was just a matter of reminding about that and saying, hey, you are really gifted at this, and you bring happiness to a lot of people, and you love the entertainment industry, and you're really, really good at it. And, you got a little stuck here. It happened to be the pandemic, obviously, and the shutdowns and such. So I said, where is your space, right? Like where is your space that, it really pulls out your best? And the answer was her home studio. So I said, that's where you need to spend more time, right? You're not spending enough time in your home studio. And, that as an example was, kind of just a little nudge to get back into the right sweet spot. And then also, we went through this granular exercise of like, okay, who are some of the people that you need to reconnect with who you haven't connected with in a while? And, sort of fine tuning some of those things, doing it with a little bit more precision. And that's all that people have to do is just, everyone has their own professional nuances and personal nuances, but it's really dialing into the same things.
That entertainment person, would they have a name that's rife with alliteration?
Rife with alliteration.
You said actress and DJ, and I thought of someone with an L first name and an L last name.
No.
Dang it. All right, because she DJs at Ibiza. So listen, we have our one part of the show we've come to that we have to do every single episode, and it's
and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
Kerry asked to pick it today, so I said, well, okay, out of several episodes, she never gets to pick it, so I'll let her pick the person of the day.
I don't, and I want to. Chloe Forbes Kinlan, my favorite Squarespace developer.
That entitles you, Chloe, to a free apple. All you have to do is go and buy the apple, and
clean it, like wash it real good.
Oh yeah, clean it.
And I would bake it into something sweet, but that's just me.
Now we have a question that we've asked every single guest that's been on here. Everyone from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Sister Ann Flanagan to Mistress Harley, the Techno Dom. What goes in your backpack? This could be something physical. It could be something metaphorical. Kerry, I gave in the warm-up one of your favorite physical ones. So I can't wait to hear what you say. What's something physical you could throw in a backpack?
A book you hate, because if it was the only book you had in your backpack, eventually you'd read it and learn something from it. That was Whiskey Nate. Who apparently is a masochist.
Who also, by the way, is top talent. He decided to quit all his stupid jobs and made up his own job of being his own kind of Instagram model.
Pictures of whiskey bottles against scenic vistas.
Yep. Sometimes drank.
Yes.
So what's something metaphorical you could add to a backpack?
Oh, kindness.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Ariel Helvetica, burlesque performer.
Well, a burlesque performer did that. Mm-hmm. Dr. Eric Frazer, what are you going to add to the backpack today?
I've got a number of backpacks, and my backpack always goes with a sleeping bag, and it's not just a sleeping bag. It's an Eastern Mountain Sports down -20 sleeping bag that has been on a lot of snowy mountaintops, and the promise that sleeping bag brings to the backpack is that you get a second day out there because you're going to spend a night somewhere.
That's deep. That's profound. So our whole conversation today reminds me of this episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, because we all know Jean-Luc Picard is the captain of the Enterprise, but in one episode they show you like